Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye. Today we'll be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and it will be from the 3rd canto, 13th chapter, 49th verse. Yasmin prasanne sakala shisham prabhao. Kim durlabham tabir alam lavatmabhi. Ananya drishtya bhajatam guhashaya. Swayam vidate swagatim param. Tasmin prasanne sakala shisham prabhao. Kim durlabham tabir alam lavatmabhi. Ananya drishtya bhajatam guhashaya. Swayam vidate swagatim param. Tasmin, unto him, prasanne, being pleased, sakala ashisham, of all benediction, prabhao, unto the Lord, kim, what is that? Durlabham, very difficult to obtain, tabi, with them, alam, away, lava atmapi, with insignificant gains, ananya drishtya, by nothing but devotional service, bhajatam, of those who are engaged in devotional service, guha ashaya, residing within the heart, swayam, personally, vidate, executes, swagatim, in his own abode, para, the supreme, param, transcendental. Nothing remains unachieved when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased with someone. By transcendental achievement, one understands everything else to be insignificant. One who engages in transcendental loving service is elevated to the highest perfectional stage by the Lord Himself, who is seated in everyone's heart. Shall we say together? Nothing remains unachieved when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased with someone. By transcendental achievement, one understands everything else to be insignificant. One who engages in transcendental loving service is elevated to the highest perfectional stage by the Lord Himself, who is seated in everyone's heart. Srila Prabhupada's purport. As stated in Bhagavad-gītā 10:10, the Lord gives intelligence to the pure devotees so that they may be elevated to the highest perfectional stage. It is confirmed herein that a pure devotee who constantly engages in the loving service of the Lord is awarded all knowledge necessary to reach the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For such a devotee, there is nothing valuable to be achieved but the Lord's service. If one serves faithfully, There is no possibility of frustration because the Lord himself takes charge of the devotee's advancement. The Lord is seated in everyone's heart, and he knows the devotee's motive and arranges everything achievable. In other words, the pseudo-devotee who is anxious to achieve material gains cannot attain the highest perfectional stage because the Lord is in knowledge of his motive. One merely has to become sincere in his purpose, and then the Lord is there to help in every way. Om Ajnana-timiram dasya Jnana-anjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Dena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nitai Namineche Namirhate Sharamulyenam Tite Chere Nitai Namineche Namirhate Sharamulyenam Tite Chere Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nothing remains unachieved when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is pleased with someone. By transcendental achievement, one understands everything else to be insignificant. One who engages in transcendental loving service is elevated to the highest perfectional stage by the Lord himself, who is seated in everyone's heart. The perfection of knowledge is to understand that devotional service without any motive, devotional service to Krishna without any motive, is the perfection of life. And there are many different paths of self-realization, but many of them include the sense that by my own power I'll come to understand Krishna. It's fortunate when someone comes to realization of being helpless. In the beginning, there must be education called sambandha gyan, because when I am unaware of my constitutional position as a servant of Krishna, and when I'm still dependent on what I think is my own power to understand Krishna, then Krishna may be difficult to understand. But devotees, by Krishna's grace, come to a decision in their lives when they only depend on Krishna and they accept Krishna as the supreme authority. Kaviraj Goswami says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when he's talking about our relationship with Krishna, specifically about Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govindam, like Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Siddhanta Bolya Chittana Kara Alash, Iha Hoite Kṛṣṇa Lagi Sudrid Manash. That's one should not be negligent to understand one's constitutional position and also Krishna's position. And one should also take help from the authorized scriptures and authorities on devotional service to understand what our relationship is and what are the specifics of Krishna's personality. When one has heard sufficiently about Krishna and about our relationship with Krishna, Prabhupada mentions in the Bhagavad-gītā, there will be a loosening in our heart of, as he calls it, the long-cherished desire to dominate the material world. It is the ambition of someone enamored of the material world to want to be dominant. There's the false ego, which Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad-gītā, is part of material nature, which is defined as a misunderstanding of one's actual identity. And part of that misunderstanding is to think that I'm acting independently from Krishna. And part of that understanding is that without my intelligence, I cannot be successful in life. One may come to a sense of frustration with the world, and if one's lucky, one can, in that frustration, be open-minded to hear from authorities. As Krishna says in the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā, there are some who come to a submissive attitude, and when they hear from the proper authority, then they become realigned with the mood that I'm not the supreme controller. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad-gītā that there's a favorable mentality for making advancement in devotional service. He calls the person who has this favorable mentality as Stita Dhir Muni. The Stita Dhir Muni becomes satisfied with Krishna's conclusions. A regular Muni feels that he or she has to distinguish themselves from every other thinker and show that I know more than other people. If there's not a twist to my ideas that is different from everybody else's, what is the use of my intelligence? Because I haven't shown myself to be more clever than everyone else. This is the definition of a Muni. One who uses the intelligence to become distinguished in the circle of other thinkers. This is prevalent in academics. It's prevalent throughout the whole world. Whatever idea somebody has, other people are waiting till he stops talking so they can give a better idea. In fact, we may notice that when somebody's talking to us, we're only waiting for that pause. People hold their space and they hold their conversation by saying, and then you can't say anything, even if you want to. But one might be thinking that, where's the gap? Because as soon as they stop, then I'm going to fill in the real thing. And this sense of individuality in this world, that I have to prove myself, comes in various mindsets called fame, adoration, distinction. I would like to be famous for something. In the world of the imaginary self, the shadow self, the ahankar, the sense of my fame, that people consider me to be noteworthy. And therefore, there's an adoration, that people adore me. And then distinction. I'm distinguished amongst all. I'm the best. My idea was the best. My service was the best. Whatever it was the best. And these three mindsets are said to be based on the false ego. And they are also mentioned by our acharyas to be mindsets that are counterproductive to our relationship with Krishna. Because, as this verse points out, and as Prabhupada mentions in the purport, motive is everything. Now, although we try to measure motive, we listen for it. We sleep on it. When someone tells us something, we may go away wondering. We may discuss with our significant other, what do you think the motive was behind what they told us? And at night, we may wake up at 1:30 in the morning and say, aha, I know what their motive was. This is a subtle distinction, but Prabhupada's pointing out in this purport that motive is what moves us. Without motive, we don't go anywhere. In fact, motive is the very definition of the living force. Motive means you desire something, and that's what moves us to go across the room or to do anything at all. There are motives in the mode of ignorance, which to somebody in a higher mode of nature look like self-destruction. Then there are modes in the mode of passion, where one feels satisfied only when one does better than the other. For many years there was an idea of keeping up with the Joneses. This is an American saying. The Joneses means the people next door. People compare themselves to their neighbors, in other words. And if they put in a new lawn, then I have to put in a new lawn. Because after all, my house next to their house, how does it appear? It looks like I'm not ahead of them. And in the world of finance, people may have enough money, but if it's not as much as other people, they don't feel satisfied. Because it's the passionate idea that I have to be more distinguished than others. Sometimes professional athletes will be given a payment of hundreds of millions of dollars to run around and bump into people. But because it was a little bit less than somebody else got somewhere else, they don't feel satisfied. They stew about it, and they're restless. It keeps them up at night. They didn't make enough to show that they were better than the other. In the mode of passion, in the mode of goodness, there's more of a sense of being satisfied, but it can't last because the modes are always fighting for supremacy. And therefore, devotional service is a subtle purification of one's motive. The motive has to be purified. Anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmanyanavrtam anukulyena krishnanu shilanam bhaktir uttama. Rupa Goswami says, in order to tread this path of pure devotional service, one's motive has to be pure. This idea of purity is also parallel with the idea of sincerity. And Krishna talks about this in several places in the Bhagavad-gītā when he uses the word ananya. And he says, ananya chintayantumam. When you can examine your own consciousness. He doesn't say that part. I'm giving context to it. When one examines one's own consciousness and notices that ananyas, that I don't want anything else but Krishna, and I'm serving, my motive is to serve Krishna, but I don't want fame, adoration, and distinction for it. I'm not doing it for a passionate reason. I'm doing it strictly because I want to please Krishna. Other philosophers have noticed the power of one's intention and one's motive. Immanuel Kant has also talked about ethics in relationship to one's intention. If one tells the truth, but it's only for one's benefit, not for the duty of telling the truth, he says, this has still not reached the level of being purely ethical. Only when one, in his conception, does one's duty, tells the truth, or dutifully does anything without consideration of one's own self-aggrandizement or profiting from the situation, has one actually done something that is laudable and with pure motive. And Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad-gītā, in this verse, ananyas chintayantamam ye jana paripasate tesham nityabdiyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham. Krishna is so aware of our motive that when... Is that Ananda Tirtha Maharaj? Hare Krishna. Please everyone stand up. Hare Krishna. Welcome back, Maharaj. Hare Krishna. Just goes to show, if you try to talk about pure intention, then sadhus start showing up because they like to hear that. Welcome back. It's so nice to have you here. It's a wonderful surprise. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Not at all, on the contrary. Ananya means there's nothing else. No other purpose for my service. And Krishna is the witness of our intentions. As mentioned by Gajendra, Krishna is waiting for us to not just turn our attention towards him, but also to display this intention that I only want you. And in the Bhagavad-gītā, as Prabhupada is quoted in the purport, tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam. When one's method of worshiping Krishna is fueled by this sense of priti, that Krishna, I only want you, you're the only thing, there is nothing else. And I'm only satisfied when I see your satisfaction. Then Krishna reciprocates in kind with such a devotee. Dadami buddhi. He says that I give more intelligence how one can come to me. So this is the fulcrum of all power in one's practice of devotional service. It's the purification of motive. And it can begin with reading this verse and being aware that Krishna is aware of my motive. Prabhupada mentions in Bhagavad-gītā 3:31 that one may become aware of one's sincerity. That is, I only want Krishna, and I only want to do devotional service, or rather pure devotional service, but one may not be able to do it. Prabhupada says that this is not a hindrance, because in the beginning, although one has a pure motive, one may not be able to yet do all that one wants to do because of the momentum of one's life. But when that seed of sincere desire is there within the heart, Krishna, dadami buddhi yogam tam, he'll give flashes of intelligence, or sometimes a steady flow of intelligence, to show us how to extricate ourselves from the complexities of the material world, which are caused by our own distractions from thinking of Krishna. Elsewhere in the Gita, when Krishna is advising Arjuna about how to prepare for the end of life, he has already said in the chapter that one should practice thinking of him. And he says when one comes to a pure motive in one's practice, ananya cheta satatam yomam smarati nityashaha chasyaham sulabha partha nitya yuktasya yoginaha. That what is a very rare thing, ananya cheta satatam, but when one's cheta, one's consciousness is ananya, that one has this mood that everything is for Krishna. Yomam smarati nityashaha, then it becomes very easy to remember Krishna. And Krishna says, although he's very hard to attain and it's very rare that one would even endeavor for achieving Krishna, in the previous chapter Krishna says, Bahunam janmanamante gyanavam mam prapadyate. No, he says, Manushyanam sahasreshu kashchid yatati siddhaye yatatam apisiddhanam kashtim mambeti tattvataha. It's rare for even the siddhas to come to this point of only wanting Krishna and nothing else. That's also in the Bhagavatam. Muktanam apisiddhanam narayana parayana. Amongst all the muktas, and the Bhagavatam catalogs them in the tens of thousands and millions. There are millions of siddhas. Many of them are not interested in the material world at all. And they've achieved a certain kind of siddha. But Krishna then narrows it to the most perfected souls. Ananya cheta satatam yomam smarati nityashaha. Those are the ones that exclusively think of me and only want me and have no motive other than pleasing me in their devotional service. For such persons, even though inept in every other way, such persons will advance in devotional service by Krishna's mercy. That's necessary to advance. One cannot, by one's own power, conquer Krishna or advance in devotional service. Brahma, as we already discussed recently, had this experience of thinking Krishna was, as the coward boy, was something fantastical. And he thought, maybe I'll steal away his cows, boys, and calves. And he might start crying to try to get him back. And then I'll help him out. But he ended up seeing that Krishna had expanded himself without any strain into these Narayan forms that were perfect duplications of the ones he had stolen. And then he came to this sense of submission to Krishna. And he gives this advice. Atapite deva patambuja dvaya prasada leshanugrahita evahi janati tattvam bhagavan mahimno nachanya eko picharam bachimban. His awareness, although he's so capable, and this can be a hindrance if one's too intelligent. Oftentimes, those who are intelligent get in their own way because they think, I'll figure this out. I've figured everything else out, so why not this? But Brahma says, it's not possible to figure out Krishna unless you get a trace of his mercy. And one can't, or I should say in the positive, one can achieve that mercy by simply agreeing to be Krishna's submissive follower. That's the mood of the verse I quoted earlier in 331 from the Bhagavad-gītā. Ye me matam idam nityam anutishtanti manava. If one just believes that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that's it. His representative, my spiritual master, speaking on behalf, that's it. One becomes a stiti dirmuni. I don't need to invent something. I don't need to bring in any extra understanding. I simply follow ekagra, one-mindedly. Tasmat ekena manasa bhagavan sattvatam pati shrotavya kirtitavyascha dhyaya pujascha nityada. What is that? I bow down to Krishna because he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and I hear chant and remember that I have no other interest. And when Krishna perceives the sincerity of any soul, and that sincerity can be, we can bring forth that sincerity at any time. We just have to go on an expedition to find it, because oftentimes it gets lost. In our condition of being embodied, we may have a lingering sense of, yes, but. Okay, Krishna's my protector, but. When Draupadi was in the clutches of the heathen barbarians who were manhandling her in front of everybody, the most abominable of scenes, and how must she have felt? at that time. Of course, she, for a moment, thought she would clutch her sari to save her dignity. But when she threw her hands into the air and said, "Hey Govinda," Krishna's response was immediate. And then he said, "I'm forever indebted to her." Krishna said, "I'm forever indebted to her, that she called my name in helplessness and said, 'Hey Govinda.'" She called for me. And Krishna is equally available to everyone when one goes on a search for one's sincerity and decides that nothing can save me, no one can save me, no circumstance in this world will protect me. Shukadeva had said earlier, to give us that foundational understanding, Deha patra kalatradish atmasaini susatsapi tesham pramatum nidhanam pashyanapi na pashyati. Said, be aware, please, listeners, that there's nobody in this world that can save you except for Krishna. And Prabhupada writes in his purport to Sarvadharman Prityaja, Mam ekam sharanam braja ahantwang sarva papibhyo mokshishami masucha. A verse that Jiva Goswami says every Vaishnava remembers constantly. They never forget this promise Krishna made. And the devotees are so grateful to Krishna for offering this. And what Krishna is saying is that if you find your sincerity and you offer it to Krishna and you say, "Krishna, I'm yours and I will surrender to you and only depend upon you," then Krishna is already there. As Gajendra, I mentioned, said, he's there waiting. It's not that he becomes bored. He's always interested in us. He's always aware of us, and what he's mostly aware of, as we found out in this verse today, is our motive. That's the most secret thing within the heart. This Bhagavad-gītā, Krishna says, rāja-vidyā, rāja-guhyaṁ. It's secret. Why is it secret? Because someone may read it and think, well, I'll make a new commentary and then I'll become Krishna. Or, who is this person? Prabhupada mentions, some people say, how audacious of him to say surrender to me. And there are scholars who are expert in dissecting the verses, but they have no intention of surrendering to Krishna. Therefore, when they write about Krishna or they give commentary in the Bhagavad-gītā, their commentaries are meaningless. What to speak of misleading? And so, the relationship we have with Krishna can be immediately realized when we find in ourselves our motive. And even if it's very difficult to bring forth, if we find even a scintilla, is that small enough? Scintilla? I don't know if a scintilla is smaller than a molecule, but there are different types of terms. One's about a specific element or entity. Scintilla means something very tiny. If we can find that, that's what's important. And so this verse is a reminder that if we're able to find that sincerity and offer to Krishna, and come what may, offer ourselves in service, tatenu kampam susamikshamano, knowing that I'm in Krishna's hands, whatever happens, because I'm a surrendered soul to Krishna. Everything that happens to me is for my purification. And as pointed out in the story of Vrikasura, that crazy, wild demon that Lord Shiva tricked into touching his own head, which burst into many pieces. In the commentaries, in that section of the Bhagavatam, it is said that when ordinary people who are not surrendered to Krishna undergo happiness and distress because of their previous karma, in the experiencing of these events, happy or distressful, they're left with seeds of karma for more happiness and distress in the material world. But when one is under Krishna's protection because of one's surrendering to Him and accepting whatever comes as Krishna's mercy, then whenever there's happiness or distress imposed by Krishna for a specific reason, which is to eliminate the last vestiges of desire we have for attachment in the material world, then there's no such seed of having to suffer and enjoy. That event is tactical by Krishna. And it doesn't leave any obligation of karma to suffer and enjoy in the material world. Krishna is so expert. So putting ourselves in Krishna's hands as the most expert surgeon who can see whatever semblance of material desires is still left over in our hearts. Even as we produce our sincerity, we're able to find it somewhere and maybe put it in our hand, if you can see it. There still may be the residuals of material desire within the heart, which are based on an idea that I want to enjoy separately from Krishna, or even protect myself or maintain myself independently of Krishna. Whatever it may be, and there are descriptions of anarthas given in Chaitanya Charitamrita and elsewhere as being seeds of material desire. Krishna will help if we express our sincerity. Part of the sincerity is the willingness to accept Krishna's help and accept it when it comes. Tatenu kampam susamikshamano, that, that's Krishna's mercy. He's helping to remove the last vestiges of desire so I can have only my sincerity. Ananyas chintayantamam, nothing else, just that. Anyabhilashita shunyam, I'm free from any other process except for surrendering to Krishna. I'm not depending on my own intelligence or any other arrangement, only Krishna's mercy. And from that, Krishna says in the Bhagavad-gītā, apichet sudaracharo bhajate mamananya bhak sadhureva samantavya samyag vyavasito hisaha. That the devotee is the one who has this sincerity of purpose. The motive is to serve Krishna, but because of the treacherous nature of the material world, it's very unsafe here. Even the best places in the world, they're 95% safe. What about the 5%? It could come at any time, the danger of the material world. Krishna says, such a person who has this motive to surrender to me, and they're offering it to me, that Krishna, I have this, even though I can't do it. Krishna says, you have to consider this person saintly. And why? Shri pram bhavati dharmatma shashvashchantim nagashati konteya prachidani hina me bhakti pranashati. Krishna then says to Arjuna, you say this out loud. Anyone who has a sincere desire to surrender to me, that's their motive. Even if they seem like the most unlikely person in the world. Because that guy? Who let him in? And besides that, think of what he's done. Krishna says, I don't care. Because if the motive is there within the heart and he knows it, then Shri Pram Bhavati Dharma. Very quickly, he said, one will come to complete purity. And Prabhupada poses the question in his purport that how can that be? That person who's made offenses or fallen down, even in the cases where they purposely fell down, because there's accidental fall down, and everyone wants to know, what's the difference? Prabhupada said, the difference is if they come back, it was accidental. And then he says, for a person in the case of the person who's sincere, but is being trounced by the material nature, by one's own mind, by the last vestiges, and they're not even vestiges, they're still raging somehow within, but somehow in the storm of those malintentions, I've found my own sincerity that I really do want to surrender to Krishna. Krishna says that person's a sadhu. That's what the sadhu is. And he says, then very quickly they'll become purified, because that scintilla, you better look it up. I don't know how big a scintilla is. The scintilla of faith in Krishna and one's sincerity to take shelter of Krishna as one's purpose in life. No other purpose. That's what I want. If you can get a scintilla of that. That one molecule, sorry, I can't think of anything small, or atom of sincerity, is so powerful, as I heard someone mention once, that if you split an atom, what kind of power is inside? Nobody can estimate the power of sincerity. And nobody could take it away from us either, because that's ours eternally. And that's our only asset. One can have wealth like Duryodhana had, offered a better option for lunch to Krishna when he was on his way to see Vidura. And Krishna wasn't interested at all. But he went to Vidura's house and just took a simple meal. Wasn't even organized very well. But he likes that. In fact, everybody likes it. If you can find sincerity in someone, Prita Maharaj says, if that's what's in somebody's heart and they speak about Krishna, you'll be radiated by that. And you'll walk away and say, what happened? Even if the person wasn't a great speaker, didn't know Sanskrit, didn't come up with a bunch of ideas that no one ever thought of. They just gave some simple presentation. Because that power comes from that atom of sincerity. Prita Maharaj says it's palpable, you can feel it. That it gives the poetical sense that the words of such a person touch Krishna's lotus feet. They touch his heart too, but here he says it touches lotus feet. And on his lotus feet, those who are pujaris know that you put some chandan on Krishna's feet, as saffron, one of the most subtle of all the spices in the world. A little sandalwood, some rose water, and you grind it up, a little camphor, put it on Krishna's feet, so that when the person with sincerity speaks, that touches Krishna's lotus feet, and it mixes with that sandalwood paste. So then when it comes out to the audience, then What is that sound? It's combined with what Prabhupada calls saffron mercy particles. Now, if you can get some saffron mercy particles, then your heart can change. But it's not based on one's scholarship. It's not based on eloquence or ability to be a good orator. What's a scintilla? We're going to find out once and for all. Maybe we're not going to find out today.
Hare Krishna.
Okay.
Scintilla is from the 1690s, and it means a spark or a glimmer, and it comes from figurative use of Latin scintilla, which means particle of fire, spark, glittering speck, or atom.
Or an atom. What do you think? Small enough? And spark kind of goes with the idea of fanning the spark. So then Krishna says, Sri Prambhavati Dharmatma. Then very quickly, one will become purified, despite any other anomalies, errant desires. That sincerity will overcome everything. And Krishna will also assist us in fanning that spark. Satyam dishiti artitam artito nirnam naivartito yad punar artito yata soyam vidate bhajatam anichitam ichapi danam nijapada palavam. Krishna says that when he notices that somebody's sincere and they still may have an admixture of crazy desires, I need a new Mustang. I mean, nothing wrong with Mustangs, but I'm just saying one might make a declaration that I want this, I want that. Krishna, please give me this, please give me that. And Krishna says, okay, you're still a little punch drunk from the material world, so I'm going to help you out here. It's like somebody who's drunk and said, give me the car keys. Like, come on, let's have a sandwich. Come with me, take the keys and lead him along. Come on, fella, sit down here. And the living entity's still a little punch drunk from the material world, even though a devotee at heart. Krishna says, come here, little fella. Tell you what I'm going to do for you. I'll give you the car keys, but first, you got to walk it off. So Krishna says in this verse that I'll fulfill your desires, but I'll do it in such a clever way that you won't want them anymore. And that you'll come to this point of ananyas chintayanta mam. So we're so lucky that this is our standard. And it's also a great relief because when you become a Stiti Dhir-muni, you don't have to think up anything. There's nothing to conjure in your mind for fame, adoration, and distinction. You just repeat what your spiritual master gave you, sadhu, shastra, and sadhu. Sadhu, shastra, guru. And follow that. And Prabhupada proclaimed that was my power in spreading the Krishna consciousness movement. I had that sincerity of purpose to follow the order of my spiritual master. And therefore I was successful. Otherwise he said I have no qualification whatsoever, nor did he have any assets. So this is the most powerful atom in the world. There are a lot of atoms. I mean, the body's made up of atoms, but it doesn't amount to much except for a heap of bones. But if there's one atom in the heart of sincerity, that I want to do this to please Krishna, to please the devotees, and that's your motive, the power from that one atom will pervade the whole of your body and mind, and also you'll exude that same specialty that only comes by following in the footsteps of the great acharyas, which is Ananya Bhakti, the pure sense, I only want to please Krishna. Om Tat Sat. And now we'll take a few reflections or questions. Anything? Yes. 1, 2.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I think one of your most beautiful lectures. Thank you so much. It pierced my heart, especially when we speak about motive, because it drives our, it's the inner reason which drives our bhakti, and we only know what's our inner reason. And also during your japa sessions, you used to always mention that let's have a sankalpa before we start our japa, or let's have a sankalpa, take a sankalpa before we do any service. This is a small pastime I heard from His Grace Hari Parshad Prabhu in one of his lectures. He mentioned this term called Padma Niti, which is given by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Padma was the mother of Kamsa, and Ugrasen was his father. And when after Kṛṣṇa killed Kamsa, Krishna was living in Dwarka with Padma and Ugrasen. And Krishna was lamenting, and he was very forlorn to go to Vrindavan for Vrajvasis. He was crying every day. And then Padma, she looked at this and she got very insecure, and she was like, maybe Krishna will return back to the Vrajvasis, and he'll not be here to help us conquer all the other kingdoms and defeat all the kings. So she said to Krishna, which is very heartbreaking, she said, for each morsel that Nand Maharaj has given Krishna, it'll be traded, we can trade each morsel by double the amount of money. And she said that, and when Prabhu was mentioning, he also had tears in his eyes, and this is my own reflection, that we cannot, like you said, fame, adoration, adulation, we cannot buy devotional service, pure devotional service, we cannot buy a connection to bhakti through all these means. It is only surrender, pure surrender. So I really wanted to bring this back.
Thank you very much. Okay. 1, 2, Shraddha.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for the wonderful class. 2 things. One is, when it comes to sincerity, you always tell us that night story about how the word comes from sand.
It's that is what is called false etymology. The story about the wax and the marble is it's apocryphal, which means that it's somebody made it up.
Is that?
It's not the true origin of the word, according to all the dictionaries I've gone through, to find out if that was, because it kind of ruins things if it's pseudo-etymology. And anyway.
Yeah. Thank you for
Anyway, it could be useful, so I'll mention what it is. The fake story about the words sincere means, sincere means without wax. And how people have extended this metaphor is that there's a way in which marble became very popular at one point, and mining it became a source of making great wealth. And much of the marble the inferior marble had cracks in it. You couldn't get as much for it. So merchants would put, and this is not inconceivable, put wax of the same color as the marble in it to erase the cracks in it. And then would sell it as high-grade marble. But then when the warm weather would come, it would melt and come out. And so this idea of sincere means you don't have to put wax in there, because when you're straightforward and you're just admit who you are and what level you're at, then that's good enough. In fact, Krishna likes it. As he says, Ye sway adhikarya nishta saguna parikirtita. That when you act according to your level and you don't try to do more or less, then he said that's a good quality. He said, I like that. Sorry, go ahead, do the rest.
No, thank you so much for the clarification. And the second thing was, thank you for the reminder of the fame, adoration, and distinction, the 3 things that we are always running after. And I was just doing an acronym of that, and it becomes FAD, F-A-D. And
F-A-T, fad.
Fad, yeah. And I looked up the meaning of fad, what
Yeah.
it means, and then so it says it's a intense and wisely shared enthusiasm for something, and fame, adoration, distinction.
Oh, fad, F-A-D, yeah.
Yeah, and it's especially one that is short-lived and without basis in the object's quality. It's actually a craze. And I was just thinking, yes, we are so crazy for the three things there.
Nicely done, Haribol. Okay, there's one here, and then we're going back to Kanka. Sharing means caring.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, I also share the same reflection that Mataji was sharing, that this is also one of the best classes because of the timing. Because today morning I was reading a quote from my Guru Maharaj which said, fulfillment comes from reciprocation of Krishna being pleased. And I was thinking such a beautiful quote. And I was thinking, would be nice if we have a reference to it. And today you spoke about the verse, which in essence is this, so I like that. I have a question regarding Sthitadir Muni and regular Muni. So you mentioned a regular Muni is interested in presenting philosophy with distinction. So he wants his own name. How do we present Krishna consciousness based on our own realization and based on the level of the audience in such a way that they are able to understand, but at the same time we are not looking for distinction or adoration in our own presentation?
Prabhupada mentions in the first canto, fourth chapter of the Bhagavad-gītā, first purport, that when you depend on the previous acharyas to make your presentation, and as in his own language, he said, you don't try to screw out any new meaning from it, but you also adjust it in language that will be appreciated by the present audience. He said, this is called realization. And that takes a lot of work. Just see Vyasadeva, who is feeling incomplete because he wasn't able to present as straightforwardly as his guru would want him to. He'd written all the Vedas, Puranas, or edited them, made them available. But then he was morose. His guru said, yeah, no. Didn't quite make it. Be more direct. And we can also, just as we check our shoes at the door, when we come in any circumstance, when you want to speak, check your ego. There's a little rack outside too for that. In fact, we could put one up. Just have one outside, and when you come in, it's like, okay, shoes off, ego off, put it in the rack. Then come in. And of course, you want to be conscientious how to present so that people get it. But at the same time, be dependent, feel dependent. That's why we say these prayers ahead of time. It's to leave our ego out and say, I'm simply speaking on behalf of all these great acharyas. And Prabhupada mentions in a purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he said, always remember where you came from. Don't ever feel entitled and come to a position where, of course I know, everybody knows I know. And once you reach that level, then you've lost that saffron mercy particle empowerment. But if you internally prepare yourself and speak what you heard, what you understood by pure listening, and try to sincerely present it and give credit where credit is due. Interestingly, Brajabihari Prabhu, expert in communications and conflict resolution, once told me, you never lose credit by giving credit where credit is due. And that's something you'll notice that all acharyas do. Before they write anything, speak anything, they'll say, it's not me. it's my guru and the guru parampara. And we really have to stay in that mode, and it's not just lip service, but when we live like that and we feel like that, contrary to what our false ego says, which is, come on, how are you going to make it in the world if you don't distinguish yourself? The Stita Dhir Muni knows that I'm just part and parcel of Krishna, and if I speak on behalf of Krishna and my Guru Maharaj, although he doesn't want it, the distinction comes anyway. In fact, Madhavendra Puri realized that when Gopinath had stolen some kheer for him, and the pujari said, hey, if anybody's named Madhavendra Puri, you better get over here, because the Lord just thought of you personally and saved this for you. And he took it gratefully, but then he decamped as soon as possible, because he didn't want that wave of fame to come at him. So devotees are always aware of the fact that they're trying to avoid it, and not in an awkward way in which they don't know how to accept something. You accept something, but then you offer it up to your spiritual master. And that's one of the ways that one has to be a conduit. You pass it up. You don't reject it, but you take it and give it to Krishna. Okay, we'll go to Kanka, and then we'll come back to Yogadish.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, thank you for the class. It was really wonderful. But I really appreciated you saying how Srila Prabhupada would always talk about, I'm only repeating what my Guru Maharaj, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, has taught me. And also the story of the Brahma story was so significant, because Lord Brahma was trying to test Krishna, and I know that was the last story that Prabhupada was translating when he was passing.
Thank you, Kanka. Deeply appreciate it, and thank you for being here and for walking the earth. Okay, Yogadish.
Hare Krishna. In service, devotees might try to be innovative with a sincere attitude. It could be on books, it could be trying a new tune, with the right attitude of trying to please Krishna. But the reality is sincerity and motivation can flicker. It might start good, but it might waver with time, and it might come back to its flickering. So when one is how do you recognize when your sincerity is less sincere? And then what's the best corrective action you can take?
It's helpful to get a bump on the head. When I was staying at the ashram in Govardhan, I had a vow for Kartik to be on time to Mangal Artik every day. And one day, one thing, you know how the soap slips out of the dish, and then the next thing happens, and I realized I was getting late. So I ran up the stairs as fast as I could, and there's this archway, and I was heading into Mangal Artik, and I could just tell they were about to blow the conch. And as I ran through the archway, I hit my head on the thing and I went flying backwards. And in that moment I thought, thank you, Krishna. I needed that. It knocked some sense into me. And I thought, yeah. And we need that. It's very helpful to be open to correction. In fact, I heard this interview with this author, and he was saying something to the interviewer, and the interviewer interrupted him and said, oh no, maybe we can't say that on public radio. It was something about political correctness. And then he could have fought back and said, what are you talking about, this, that. But then he said, yes, I live to be corrected. And I pulled over the car. I said, I'm writing that down. I didn't get the tattoo yet, but... And if we're in that mode of living to be corrected, which is, devotees are always checking themselves. It's not that they just assume I'm doing everything right. But we're checking to see, by the mercy of the previous acharyas. And so it's helpful to have godbrothers and any other superiors, guru, that can chastise you and give you a good bump on the head. I've been blessed to have peers who felt free to level chastisement. I have also, it's helpful to be a grihasta, because in relationship between husband and wife, you're so close that the wife can say, or the husband can say, that, yeah, no. And we should be open to that. One who lives to be corrected and is open for the false ego to be hit with that hit on the head, like I got. By the way, I did make it a Mangalartik, even though I had a gash on my head. We need that, because it's so pervasive and sticky, the false ego, that always wants to get back in. It's like, I'm humble, I'm humble, I'm humble. I'm the most humble. Nobody's more humble than me. And Prabhupada was expert at, somebody said that I'm the most fallen. Prabhupada said, you're not the most anything. The utsahan mayi, the youthful enthusiasm that, oh yeah, I got this. And if you're in the ashram, like Mahamuni was sick and he groaned. He was sleeping on the floor in the brahmacharya ashram. He had a fever, and one of the new brahmacharis who had learned all about devotional service said to this senior devotee, he said, Prabhu, you're not your body. And he got up on his elbow with all his strength and he said, Prabhu, you're not my body either. So we need that devotee sangha. It doesn't just mean fun and games, but we also want to get correction, course correction constantly. That's important. Okay, there was just Shankari Kaur.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Please accept my most respectful obeisances at the dust of your lotus feet. My pranams to Guru Ma also, and all the Vaishnavas who are assembled here. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Such a beautiful class, Guru Maharaj. I could not help myself but come and join on Zoom. I was listening on YouTube. 2 classes back to back, last Saturday and this Saturday. And Guru Maharaj, just wanted to share a realization that we were talking about dependence on Krishna, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, he says that our real independence comes from complete dependence on Krishna. And that is so true, because when we depend on Krishna, we actually situate ourselves in our constitutional position, which is freeing ourselves from our false ego. And nothing can be more liberating than that, and nothing can actually take us to the better independence than that. If we are able to get to that point, then yes, we are liberated, we are independent. And so it was just reflecting on that point, Guru Maharaj. And then we were also talking about sincerity this evening. Guru Maharaj, I think your sincerity brings us back to where we need to be. You set the gold standard for all of us, Guru Maharaj. So thank you so much for reminding us as to what we need to do, how to stay put on our path, and how to be completely surrendered to Krishna at every step we take. Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj. I draw a lot of strength from your classes, Guru Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Shankari Kaur. I just say, in regards to sincerity, there's a phrase, running scared. It's helpful to have this sense, I'm running scared, meaning someone says, oh, you've achieved this, you've achieved that. And devotees generally will slough that off as quickly as possible and say, what I'm doing is running scared. Prahlad Maharaj said, Trastosmaham kripanavatsaladusahogra samsara chakra karanad basatam grahita kadgambra griya yadavocharadhad ditsus Tvamishvaro maraparo patumam karami. That there's a way in which, when there was all this fear around the appearance of the avatar of Lord Nrsingadev, and they were so afraid that they pushed Prahlad forward and said, you try to pacify him. Everyone's afraid of Lord Nrsingadev. And he said, I'm not afraid of you, my Lord. But what I'm afraid of is your Vishnu Maya. That at any time that false ego can come back and I can be pulled back down into the mix. So it's not that we come to a particular stage and then it's over, but as Prabhupada says, we should think, I'm the servant, 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 servant 1,000,000 times removed. He said that is liberation. And there's never a point at which we should think that I'm liberated. I'm free from the influence of Maya, therefore I can make an exception. So in that very moment when one thinks I can take liberties because I'm liberated, that's the time in which the false ego comes back in. And we should run scared until the last breath and depend on Krishna in that way. And I'd just like to say something about Ananda Tirtha Maharaj, who's come here as a messenger of Vishnu, because when an unexpected guest comes, that's the appearance of the Lord himself. He's one of the great pioneers of Western outreach, and in San Diego and elsewhere, but that's where he first established himself as temple president, or he was given the post of temple president, but he started a mode of teaching there in which he helped to translate the intricate philosophy of Krishna consciousness in such a way that it would be accessible to the people, the local people there, from Pacific Beach, Ocean Beach, PB, Pacific Beach, which is a different language than other people speak all over the world. It's the language of the party town. And he was able to bridge that, and also he was the brains behind the Shastradhana. He had come up with a system by which he would invite devotees to give money, who wanted to see book distribution go on, but they weren't able to go out themselves. And then he would hold programs for them to appreciate them, and they became his faithful supporters. And then he and his team would go out and place these books in many institutions where they would be taken by other people, and in that way he expanded book distribution. And this way he's become a great pioneer in the Krishna conscious movement. Proud to say he was here for some time around the Bay Area, and for whatever reason he came back. Thank you. I hope you're staying. And now we have the main part of our program today, which is we have a very short talk by one of the very fortunate youth who has prepared something for us today. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Shri Panchatattva, Shri Shri Radha Madan Mohan, Shri Shri Lakshmi Nrsingadev, if you so desire, please empower us to daily and moment to moment find our own sincerity and offer ourselves in surrender in the mood of Sarva Dharman Parityaja. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone who agrees with this prayer, in whole or in part, please unmute and say Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Kripa Sindhu Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Nantakoti Vaishnavini Ki Jai Gaur Premanande Haribo.
His Grace Vaisesika Maharaj ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.